Hey, everybody. Welcome back to The Collective. We have another fantastic show for you today. I am super excited. We got Dr. Luke joining us today for the first time on The Collective. We got Kathy rejoining us. This is going to be a good show. Now, while I'm excited, you should be excited too. Do all the things. Hit the buttons. Oh man, my brain's going left, right, and center here. Like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, do all that good stuff. Get your emails whenever we go live, which is, of course, Fridays for The Collective, Wednesdays on The Gold Mine. And if you have any thoughts, questions, comments, anything at all, by all means, put them up in the comment section. We can engage those throughout the show. We're going to be talking control, aggression, and control. I'm all of a sudden dyslexic for some reason today. Now, let's get some intros out of the way. Kathy, 10, 15 seconds. Who are you? Where you come from? All that good stuff.
Oh, yeah. So, Kathy Hubble, I come from Kelowna, BC, and judo for the better part of my life, many years. I won't say how many because it'll date me, but jiu-jitsu for the last bunch of years as well, and black belt in both. And also, I'm a stunt coordinator in the film industry. That's my career.
Bam. Like it. Dr. Luke, how about yourself?
I'm an orthopedic surgeon, specialized in hand surgery, but also was involved in combat sports for a little while, doing jiu-jitsu and a couple mixed martial arts fights along the way.
I like it. This is going to be a good one. Sean, how's the mountains treating you now that you have power?
Yeah. Everyone coming in all humble with just a couple of years of martial arts training, Wow. It's going to be a good conversation.
Well, I think this plays into it right off the bat. So, like I said, we're going to be talking about the balance of aggression and control. And, the first thought right off for my mind in terms of control and aggression is martial arts. That's one of the easiest low-hanging fruit for us to go into right now. But I want to get your guys' first thoughts just in general on when you hear the balance between aggression and control. What are your first thoughts? Doc Luke, I'm going to put you up first. What do you think?
Sure. I think the balance in anything and everything is crucial, but control and aggression certainly are sometimes opposite things. Sometimes they can be combined to become something even better. And then I guess just to go a step back further, I think there's very little that we can control, but one of those things is aggression. And yeah, it's cool stuff.
I like it. That's a good first thought. Kathy, what are you thinking?
Well, I know I definitely have aggression issues sometimes, and who knows if I can control them. So this will be great to listen to Dr. Luke, and he can explain how to control my aggression.
There you go. This is a good way to start. Sean, what are your first thoughts?
I'm not sure if any of us are going to explain any of that, but I think that you need both. I think you can't have one without the other. Actually, you could. You could have one without the other, but you'll never understand the one that you've got. I think you need to have both aggression and control, and you need to play with both in order to understand the other. That's my opening thoughts.
I would agree. I think especially Kathy and I were talking right before we started here about, spazzy white belts when we first get into jiu-jitsu, and it's like all aggression, zero control. And I think that over time you start to develop that control through realizing that aggression doesn't really help. But I think also you can get too far on the other side of that and remove your aggression and not really be fighting, just be defending all the time, which is also a bit of a struggle. So I'm wondering how you guys, especially within the martial arts realm, but also in your lives, how have you developed that sense of balance? Luke, what do you think?
For me, it's a lot of trial and error and learning from failure, and then going from there. But the some people are going to have the default aggressive personality, and other people are going to have the default kind of passive and kind of want to take a step back. And the coaches are going to have to figure out who is what and where, and you're going to yourself have to figure out who you are to get better at whatever you're deficient in. But kind of as I alluded to earlier, I think the control thing is probably the most important part, for a few reasons. Certainly in martial arts, that spazzy white belt who throws that elbow that shouldn't be there, and you get smacked by it, and it's like, dude, I'm letting you into this match, and this is what I get for it: the shot to the face. So I think control is probably a good first thing to start with, and is probably the paramount thing. But clearly, martial arts aggression, focused aggression, controlled aggressions can be really important to develop, and that just takes time and reps.
Reps for sure. Kathy, any thoughts on this?
Absolutely. I mean, judo, it's a lot about aggression, and there's control, of course, for the correct technique. But until I joined jiu-jitsu, I kind of didn't learn the control factor as much. And that was good for me because control in jiu-jitsu is taught right from the white belt, and pace yourself and, slowly and methodically and 23 moves ahead, work out your technique. Whereas judo is so explosive and dependent on this aggressive, minute timing, and off balancing and such. So therefore, jujitsu was so good at white belt, blue belt, any level actually, to learn that control and to pace everything down to the mechanics of every move. What I've had to do though, and it's interesting, is the BJJ athletes that I've dealt with in my judo club, I have to get them to be more aggressive because they're so used to the pacing and the control of each movement into the next movement. And it's almost because especially the ones that don't compete a lot, the ones that just roll, they're very controlled and the technique is beautiful and technically perfect, possibly, but they don't have the aggression. And when they go to a competition, they just don't have that aggression that they need, and you need to have it to compete. So that's one thing I've noticed of my judo and my BJJ athletes that I coach. And as soon as I kind of light that spark of, hey man, you gotta feel like you're gonna rip the bark off a tree when you go out in this match. It's not a lollygag roll on a Sunday stroll. It's not an open mat, and you need to get out there and be aggressive. So that's the difference I've noticed between the two arts.
That is a great point. I know I struggled with my aggressiveness in my judo training, which is just minuscule in terms of jiu-jitsu. But Sean, thoughts on this?
Yeah, a couple. And it kind of came about when Kathy said, tear the bark off a tree. That's kind of how you got to set yourself up for a match or for for a confrontation. Funnily enough, yesterday I was kicking bark off of trees, and and I've been doing that for a long time, man. I nearly went to jail for trying to kick down trees in the forest when I was in the army, just because the sergeant major didn't like the fact that I was maybe a little bit too default aggressive. And so I've been doing that for a long time, but that doesn't mean that I had control. I had control of my martial arts. I knew how to throw a kick. I knew how to hold a kick. I knew a lot of things about a lot of things, but what I didn't understand when it comes to control in respect to martial arts is the control of myself internally. And so I brought all kinds of aggression and firepower, but it was BJJ that taught me that I didn't have good personal control. And so, first, as we all know, the first time you get on the mats, first weeks, first months, whatever the case is, it's a whirlwind, man. And my first 15 minutes of rolling, which was me trying to defend my honor / life / what I thought I could do, I was seeing stars by the end of that 3 times 5 minute back-to-back rolls with all the guys who were putting the hurt on me. And I was just trying to survive / fight. And you know how that goes. And so when I got home, I laid down on my living room floor, basically did a big sweaty, freaked out snow angel on my hardwood floor, and thought, what just happened? What it did was it exposed me to me. And so you can have lots of aggression. You can understand all the aggression in the world. And you can have control of your physical skill sets. But that doesn't mean that you've got control internally. And I really feel that BJJ exposed myself to myself.
Now, I'm wondering, in addition to this question, is that have you noticed any sort of bleed through into your everyday life, into your job, into your lifestyle, and from that understanding of controlling aggression? I'm going to come right back to you there, Lucius. What do you think?
Oh yeah, I definitely have noticed carryover from training jiu-jitsu combat sports and into life as a surgeon. There are lots of examples, but I'll try to go with the controlled aggression side of things. Kind of the lessons are you have to, as Sean was alluding to, be able to control within yourself. There can be a ton of stuff going on. Things are a little out of control in the operating room. Unanticipated things coming up. There's lots of other pressures outside, everything pulling you in different directions. It would be easy to kind of freak out and feel like you're drowning. But I'm not literally being choked. I'm not being punched in the face. I am not getting stuck in an arm bar. I'm all right. I'm okay. I've had the volume kind of turned down on things because I've dealt with actually being on the other side of a direct aggression of trying to hurt me. And okay, all right, I'm gonna be okay. I can get through this. And that mental ability to calm carries over into a lot of different things.
I don't know how many times I've had to like mentally hit myself in the head and be like, okay, you're not dying right now. It's okay. Just remember myself
Yeah.
getting choked. Kathy, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, definitely. When you're being choked, there's you try to control, or when you're doing the choking, you try to control during a practice, obviously not putting the person out. And I think there's a level of control you have to exercise there. When you're, I've seen demos for some reason online where people actually are demoing how to do a choke and they put the guy out that he's choking or do something to his arm when they're showing an armbar. And that's zero control. What's interesting, BJJ does bleed over into life so much because we have to learn to control during a demo, control during a roll, control during a jiu-jitsu practice, judo practice as well, how to control our physical body. And that's a mental control first, of course. But you still have to remain aggressive, I think. I love the fact that I've come to a place where I like getting into bad situations where I am being choked out. I'll give up my back, give up my arm, whatever. And that teaches me the control, not to freak out. It's just, methodically controlled atmosphere here. I'm going to get out of this arm bar. I'm going to stop this choke. And we all learn that transitioning from spazzy white belt to blue to purple. Probably took me a lot longer, purple brown maybe, where I got my aggression under control. But it's a great example how it bleeds over into our regular life. I've got this shirt on today that says Seiryoku Zenyo, which is a Japanese term for maximum efficiency with minimal effort. And it kind of describes control to a T. And you should be able to be aggressive, but in a controlled manner. And that starts with the mind.
100%. Totally agree with that one. Sean, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I'm wearing a shirt as well that says maximum aggression, maximum aggression. I wasn't taught much control when I was a young buck, that's for sure. And the unit that I got posted to Commando in 1986, I pretty quickly got sub-posted into the unarmed combat demonstration team, which we did things kind of a little nationally. And so, like, I was just a young guy that liked throwing people through walls, like judo throws all over the place. And I learned on dirt, so we didn't have mats. And so we'd be whipping each other onto the planet Earth at warp factor 3. And it wasn't like we were trying to hurt each other, but we didn't hold back. We didn't consider consequences. It's not like I'm trying to break the person. I'm just less concerned about how they land. That's on them. Now, that's how I was taught. I'm not saying, please, anyone out there who's coming up in the sport that's new to it, do not start how I started, because I was probably taught wrong. And so, to my point, I'm being a bit tongue-in-cheek, but now I'm going to get to my serious point. How you're introduced to aggression and control can carry forward into your life and become your way, unless someone enters your life and tells you differently. So if I hadn't have looked at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu at 52 and thought, I think I'm going to tie on a new white belt, if I hadn't have done that, my way would have still been default aggressive, but I'd have been looking for walls to throw people through. rather than now when I connect with someone or touch them, I'm just looking to control them rather than aggress them. And so when I was younger, I needed more people like Kathy around me who had a wider exposure to other martial arts that weren't quite as make a hole, make it wide, right through the person in front of you, which is how I was raised. And so there's a time and place for that. But that time and place isn't for every second of every day for the rest of your life. So look to engage with.
I think we might have lost him. I wonder
Darn.
his.
He's
Dang,
frozen.
he was like right in the middle of a good point too. And
I
then,
know, I was just hanging on his every word.
well, I'm sure he will rejoin us shortly. But he does
Okay.
bring up a good point in the fact that, for myself, I was actually very much the opposite. I grew up in the overly controlled environment, so that I didn't have that aggressive. I had to consistently dial myself up on a regular basis. Sean, are you back with us yet? I think he's here with us. No, he's still frozen. Oh, there he is.
Am I frozen?
There
Sorry
we
about
go.
that. If I froze, that's okay. We can carry on. I'm sure I wasn't saying anything
Great.
that important.
It was a really good point. It was just so wicked. Anyway, but the point being is that I had to dial my aggression up because I was so I was brought up in a way that I needed to I had to dial myself back on a consistent manner. So I'm wondering, perhaps, do you guys have any tips or tricks that you have noticed growing up in terms of either how to dial up the aggression or how to dial it back? Kathy, I'm going to start with you. What do you think?
I really like trigger words. So I'll use trigger words if I need to dial it up. If I'm getting ready for a match or something and I'm finding myself a little too composed and I'm going to go in there with too much control or pacing the match or anything like that, I know that I don't do well under those circumstances. So I'll use either trigger words like decimate, destroy to amp myself up, or I'll use trigger music to amp myself up. So that's just a me thing, but I do kind of with my athletes try to find out what their trigger is or what their thing is that's going to amp them up and get them more aggressive. And it's different for everybody, I think, but you try out, with each person. Maybe let's try Chariots of Fire music just before you go out in your match, or some Metallica, or some people just really need the music to be calm, and some Enya or something, and then so for music I'm like Metallica, Rocky theme, all of it right before a match. And sometimes I really need it because if I felt sick recently or something, or I'm just down or something happened and I'm sad, I need that amp up. So for me, I'll start with my trigger words and my trigger music, and that helps a lot to get more aggressive. That's just for me.
I like it. Luke, what are you thinking?
I dig the idea of triggers. I guess my default growing up was also control, be calm, restraint. And when you get into sports, whether it's wrestling or jiu-jitsu or whatever, it wasn't necessarily that useful because sometimes you do have to go. And I did find along the way that you'd see the guys get amped up and they're listening to the Metallica, and yeah, I would get amped up too, but my mind would get clouded and I wouldn't be focused on what I needed to be focused on. And so I'm also along the lines of needing something that will focus me, but not necessarily be amped up. When I get that sympathetic heart rate up, all that kind of stuff, my brain, instead of kind of focusing, I get kind of scattered. And so I've found that I need more calming, and that helps me be more directed and focused and focus where I need to be aggressive.
I really like that. Sean, what are you thinking on this one?
My son Evan is much like that. He got a nickname when he was about 13 or so. The club, the BJJ club, he's been rolling for 8 years. At that time, named him the Iceman, just because he was so freaking zenerific, chilled out. Like, he didn't need anything. He didn't need any trigger words. He didn't need Braveheart. He didn't need like a battle spear. In fact, he didn't need calm. He didn't need quiet. He just needed to be himself. And not pump his fist at anything, just be chillaxed. And he'd kind of saunter onto the mat and he'd look a little sleepy. And then he'd connect with a person and he'd be still a bit sleepy because he wouldn't overextend his spirit more than he just felt natural to contain. And so he never really flared out on the mat like in a Braveheart moment. And when he'd win, he wouldn't like do double pumps at the ceiling and do the flippity flop spins like he was a world champion. He just took it moment by moment and didn't act out. And I know that is not that's not like the definition of what someone should be on the mats. It's just the definition of who he should be on the mats. And so I'm not disrespecting anyone who likes to pump their fist in the air and celebrate the moment, because if that feels natural to them, well, freaking rock on. But you've got to know who you are. You've got to be who you are. And then the moment that you win or lose, you've got to still be who you are. And so Evan was a good example for me of observing someone who stayed authentic to himself within his authentic journey. And I tried not to spoil that for him by, getting right up in his grill before a match and running Braveheart Jedi mind tricks into his little peanut to make sure that he was good to go. I just watched him get good to go in his own way. And I think that's an important aspect, is letting someone live their journey and not detour it too much for them to see who they grow into.
This is a really interesting thought. It goes directly into the question that I was going to ask on this was, what do you use to cultivate it in other people, in terms of, like, I got 3 black belts here. I'm sure we've all taught other people how not only to do martial arts, but other things. And, or sorry, Sean, you have multiple black belts, not in BJJ. That's not what I was talking about. But the point being is, what do you use to cultivate control or aggression in others? How do you draw that out when you're teaching those around us? Luke, I'm going to start with you. What do you think?
Yeah, certainly in the world of jiu-jitsu, I think a lot of the people who get into things like that are more aggressive. And so they're rushing through things and they want to go from point A to point Z in one step. And often it's a matter of slowing them down. And sometimes you even ask them to, hey, breathe, take it easy. You got to do this and you got to do this. And this is why. You give them some concepts, and then it'll start happening. And then they become safer and they can go through the process that they need to get to where they need to go. But from my end, being the person who wasn't super aggressive, and then being around the people who sometimes have that challenge of competition, it is a different energy having to compete. And so you can be great technically and your flow rolls look amazing, but you do need that aggression. And for me, and for the people that I find out there, you need to get them really focused on, this is what you have to do. It's not, hey, you're moving around, you're flowing, hey, see what happens if this happens. It's, get that armbar. Give them a direct focus. You're going for this. And I think that helps those people have, like, oh, all right, this is what we're doing. At least from my end and the people I've worked with, those are the kind of the way I've gone with those things.
I love it. Focus is such a great thing, and being able to pick things apart for myself, it's very similar how I need it to. Kathy, thoughts on this?
Yeah, I agree with Dr. Luke. We got to have sort of know what you're going to do. And for me, I think maybe cultivating control in the athletes that I'm coaching, I would do a lot of repetition, and repetition breeds control, because, like, for example, in judo, we have thousands and thousands of repetitions of a throw. And really, there's only pretty much 8 throws in judo that you have many combinations off of, or different angles or different foot of those 8. And so if we can repetition out of it, then usually that's going to give them the control they need, and also having a sequence. So going into a competition, if you just have all these billions of things going on, you just learn De La Hiva guard this week, and this sweep and that sweep, and that throw, and you went to a judo once that week, and so this one takedown, and you go into a match and you don't have a sequence, all that's going to be buzzing around in your head, and you won't have any control in that match. And sometimes you actually freeze and in the middle of the match or the beginning of the match. So what's better to have, I think, is a sequence that you know, whatever that's going to be for you. Throw, pass, choke. That's what I say just before my match. And I've already got the exact moves I'm going to do down to the detail, and I've visualized it over and over and over. And again, visualization can give you that control, cultivate that control as well, because you've already been there. You've already seen yourself doing that exact sequence millions of times. And the night before the match, you've seen it more millions of times. And then in the bullpen, you've seen that exact sequence, 10,000 more times. You're going to cultivate that control when you go out into the match and bump fists, because you now have that sequence already learned billions of times, and you just go out and you do it. Now that's going to give you that control of that match.
I love that. Sean, thoughts?
Yeah, a feeling of control, maybe not control, but before the match starts, you've got a sense that you have some control in the next few seconds. And how I've liked to explain it to people is, if you have to give a speech to a large audience, what you need to do is practice your first 10 to 20 seconds of that speech, and then the rest generally takes care of itself. So you need to be able to spit out, "Good afternoon, my name is Sean Taylor. What I'm going to be speaking about this afternoon is," and for the next 20 seconds, you've got your little spiel that you practiced and practiced and practiced, visualized in your head, so that you can bing, bang, boom, deliver it easy peasy. And I think that that's what I've tried to teach nearly everyone, is have your opening 10 to 20 seconds, 15 seconds in your mind, see what you're going to do before the match starts. And as you reach out to do whatever you're going to do, if it changes, if the opponent causes you to change your approach, then so be it. But you had an opening sequence that you could rely on to some degree to get you going. Just like when you're delivering a speech, if you get up in front of the microphone and you haven't practiced the "Good afternoon, my name is Sean Taylor," then what you have is the possibility of that pause, that, "Oh, why am I here?" And so I think some people, maybe myself included at times, just need to know why they're there and what they're about to do. And then the rest kind of takes care of itself.
I think it's funny because you told me the same thing. I think, I can't remember if it was last year, but something similar to that. Is it last year or maybe a little bit before, of during just before competition, was like, get your first 10 seconds down, and after that, do jujitsu. And I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. And I've actually used that quite a bit in terms of teaching the newer people that are come to my club. If you're going to go to a tournament, okay, cool. First 10 seconds. We're going to work on the first 10 seconds over and over and over again, and then we're just going to do jujitsu after that. But I'm wondering also, I mean, on the movie set, I imagine there's a lot of aggression in terms of some of the stunts you're doing. I'm sure in the medical realm, there's a lot of people that have a lot of questions or a lot of emotional stimulation in terms of what's going to happen and so on and so forth. But also, I was thinking, and I just more of a question for Luke as well, but how do you manage other people's aggression through your own control outside of the mats? What do you think? Luke, I'm going to come to you first. What do you got?
All right. So managing other people's perhaps aggressiveness with my control. So some of it is leading by example. If I match their energy, then it's often going to get elevated, and then we just keep going up like that. And we've all had that experience of get into a shouting match or more because you match the person's energy. And so if you can kind of keep it in a place where you can be detached, control over your own emotions, you're going to make much better decisions and perhaps say things you don't regret, and still be clear-headed if things do change and you need to react to it. I think, just remaining calm yourself is going to be the first thing and being control over yourself is going to be the best thing to help other people who may be a little out of control. The instant they realize you're not rising up with them, you're not getting out of control, hopefully they kind of realize, oh, hey, I don't have to be aggressive right now. I can calm down.
I 100% agree with that. Kathy, thoughts?
I agree also. Yeah. And, to bring it to a movie set, during a stunt, for example, the stunt performer, say he's standing up on the cliff, and maybe he's not a high fall specialist, and he's just got to do an easy 25-foot fall into a box rig or something off the cliff. And,
Easy.
To focus him or her on that again, the night before or the night before that, I would have already been chatting with that stunt performer, and especially if they're a little nervous about that fall, and getting them to start visualizing it. And because repetition and visualization, if you've done it, so then they're focused when they get to that exact position. I'll send them video ahead of time of the cliff edge, so they can visualize it properly, that cliff edge, so what it looks like, what the landing looks like, a picture of the boxes they're going to fall into, that sort of thing. And then when you're up there on the cliff edge with them, there's so much going on. It's unbelievable. Catering is over, we got the hot snack is ready, and oh, wait, I'm hungry. Your stomach is rumbling. A director is telling you to do something different. You should have walked up to it, not just stand and fall. Oh, the actress has to punch first. There's so much going on in an actor or a stunt performer's world in their head prior to leaping off that cliff or getting set on fire or whatever their stunt is. So I find that preparation and visualization will give them the greatest chances of success. They've prepped, they've seen the cliff edge. Sometimes if they're there in town and I can take them to the cliff edge, that's even better because they can really visualize ahead of time. And then also seeing the box rig, get them to practice in the gymnastics studio ahead of time, that exact fall, that 25 feet, hang off the basketball hoop and fall into a porta pit mat, do that, 50 times, day before. All of that preparation and visualization gives them great chance for success, and they can have control when they get up on the cliff edge, a better chance for it anyways.
I like that, except for the fact that you said an easy 25-foot fall. That doesn't seem easy to me, but I guess when you got practice for sure. Sean, any thoughts on this?
How apropos. I mean, talking about aggression and control literally on the edge of a cliff. And so, I mean, how many times have we all heard that statement? I took him right to the edge of the cliff and he had to make a decision. And so I think it's a great example. And Kathy, in my opinion, exemplified how best to manage those kind of situations, and that is to get in front of the situation before the situation occurs. And so in the days leading up to the situation, you're priming someone mentally, emotionally, to some degree physically, if they're doing enough visualization. You're priming someone to be in the moment before the moment occurs. Now let's wipe all of that off the table. That now doesn't exist as an option. Now you've just got the person who 10 seconds ago climbed off of the bus with the crustless sandwiches, walked straight to the edge of the cliff, said, "Hi, you're the stunt director. What do I do next?" And they have had no priming. They've had no preparation. They're only halfway through the cucumber sandwich and they're wondering what's next. So, Kathy, in those moments where it's bang, they're right in front of you, do you have sage advice for these kind of circumstances where there's no prep, there's no time, there's just now, and whatever's about to happen is going to happen in the next few minutes?
That's a great question, Kathy.
Yeah, for sure. And that's a good example of what I deal with a lot up here, because we don't have a lot of prep time in the stunts that I'm trying to coordinate on these movies. We have a very limited budget, and a lot of times it's not a stunt performer I'm dealing with. I'm dealing with the actual actor or actress, and they've never done this before. I can take a stunt performer and they have so much to rely on. They've done cliff falls, they've done fire burns, they've done it all. So they've got lots to draw on and visualize. But so for an actor or an actress, which with their limited budgets here when we're filmmaking in Kelowna, we have not a lot of time, not a lot of rehearsal, and not a lot of draw on in the past for this actor's experience. So it's literally physically a quick break fall lesson. If I got them for an hour or two, easy low falls onto mats, and then raise up, and then onto the mats, and then raise up onto the mats. Get them physically comfortable completely with it. If I've only got them for 2 hours and not the usual, like in Vancouver when I'm doing a film, we would have days and days of rehearsal in a studio somewhere with box rigs set up and alternate heights and scaffolding. And, so this was, improvised on the cliff over on the side with a small mat falling into it, and then a little bit fall into it, a little bit fall into it. Now I'm going to raise the mats up and you're going to fall from here. A quick physical rehearsal is definitely necessary. And if I've had no time to prep this person, like I didn't for some reason have time to send them a video of what they'd be experiencing. And don't worry, I would never put an actor on a 25-foot fall unless I had 23 feet of mats and boxes all the way up to the cliff edge. I'm just talking about an actor that has to do a little fall. So say 6 feet, and I'll have 2 feet of mats. So it's a little small fall, but it still requires some skill, especially when they've got, an actress pushing them off, or, a gun in their hand. They've just shot someone, somebody's wringing their neck and then tucks them off the cliff, or whatever the situation. So I physically get them ready by doing increments. And then mentally, I tell them, don't listen to the caterer, don't listen to the grips, don't listen to the director, don't listen to the sound guy. Even if they're pawing all over you and they're fixing your hair and doing your makeup and putting your mic on and all the things, just focus on me. And when I say 3, 2, 1, action, you only listen to me. If that director says, abort, no, it's not, doesn't matter. You do what I say in that moment, and that's all that matters. And then usually we can get them through it safely.
But my crustless sandwiches.
I know.
That's a hard one to take. This is a beautiful point in terms of that there are times where you don't actually get a moment to think, and you just have to do. And I imagine, Sean, you've had multiple experiences of this throughout the military and martial arts in general. Luke, I imagine you've had to make snap decisions while doing surgery and things like that, where all of a sudden you need to fix stuff. Any thoughts on this before we move on to the next question?
Sometimes it's easier if you didn't have the impending event coming up. You didn't have the anxiety and the fear of whatever's happening. It just happens. And so sometimes that's a little bit easier as far as the process goes. But clearly there's going to be situations that people are not going to be prepared for without warning. And hopefully you've taken some steps earlier in life that might give you something you can pull on to make a decision or an action. But I think most of the time the best you can do is just kind of give them a thing to go for. As Kathy kind of mentioned, listen to me. And that kind of, they don't have to think about anything else. They can just go and with that one instruction. And so if you can do that for yourself, simplify it, like, oh crap, here we go. Focus on one thing. Or you can do the favor to someone else and give them that confidence with just focus on this. I think those spur of the moment situations will be that much more manageable.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. Sean, what about yourself?
Bear with me, because my mind works in unusual ways sometimes. So I'll need about a minute for this. When you asked the question, here's what popped into my head as a imagery. Of course, the Olympics are ongoing right now. And my wife and I just finished a Netflix series called Sprint. It's got 6 episodes in it, and it is freaking the best viewing this year. It's an amazing series. It's about the men and women preparing to go to the Olympics as they fight their way through something called the Diamond Series, which runs around the world. And so when Team USA is competing in a certain part of the USA to win at the Diamond Series, then the athletes in Jamaica are competing at the same time that day for the same Diamond Series event, as it were, and same with other athletes around the world. But what's fascinating about the series is the characters who are part of the sport. And I mean, the way their minds work, their competitive drive, their dedication to wanting to win at all costs is fascinating. The psychology of this series. And after the first episode, I wanted to like go live with some of them just because I wanted to be around that. By the end of the 6th episode, in my mind, there's some of the most fascinating humans on the planet. I never knew much about the 100-meter and 200-meter sprint as a sport. And I only know a bit more now after watching the series. But I am truly fascinated by the characters that it takes to compete, not only at that level, but with that mindset to move towards that level. If anyone hasn't watched the series, I'm encouraging you to go check it out. And that would epitomize the idea behind aggression versus control. The entire sport is a sport of controlled aggression, of milliseconds. When they're on the line and they are in the set position about to pounce, when they're waiting for that gun to go off, it's true aggression and control competing in the moment to not have a false start, to not miss the millisecond punch. 100 meters is so unforgiving that there is no room for error. And when there's no room for error, there's room for aggression error or control error because you know there's no room for error. And so now that I've said that, what I saw in my mind was me, for whatever reason, standing in the crowd right up against a fence as the runners were running by, but in a 4-person baton, passing the baton relay race. And again, in my mind, someone ran straight up to me, handed me a baton in the crowd, try to make sense of this, and said, "Go." Now, what does every human do in that moment when they get handed a baton and say, "Go"? Some will do this. What do you mean? Some will look at their friend and say, "Who is that person?" And some will take that baton, do some quick math and see people running in front of them and start running in the direction of the other runners, trying to chase them down. I don't know why in my mind I was chasing down other runners that I can't catch, but someone handed me the game set. I understand the win condition. I don't want to be in the loss, so I'm going to punch forward and start chasing down runners. Now, how do you learn how to do that? I think anyone can learn how to grab a baton and start running with very little thought involved, like move now. But it takes time. It takes, typically, I believe, consequence time. So if there's no consequences to your inaction, then you're going to grab a baton every day and look at everyone around you and say, what's going on here right now? But if you're used to consequences of inaction, and the reason this came up is because Lucius was talking about action or non-action. I think that it tells a lot about a person when they get that baton and they're either puzzled or they solve the puzzle. That's just my thoughts.
This is an interesting line to go down. Lucius, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, there's different people out there, and so personal story, one of my weaknesses was doing unscripted things in front of an audience. That was terrifying to me, and so I avoided those situations. I could give a presentation, but I'd prepare. I would have my PowerPoint and know every slide and be ready and be able to do the presentation reasonably well. But in front of an audience, unprepared, that was a nightmare for me. So what I've started to do is improv classes on my own, just kind of doing these classes so I could start learning a skill set of being handed a baton. Hey, here's a word, make a scene out of it with a scene partner. And it's skill sets that I, one, lean into fear and know what to do once you get that baton. And I think some people want to lean into that fear and get better, and other people are going to avoid it with a passion, and they're not going to get better. Hopefully we can encourage people to want to get better and give them room to feel like failure is okay. As long as they get back up, it's not failure. But it's also up to an individual to notice their weaknesses and want to get better.
100%. The interesting thing about that, it seems really familiar, unscripted, in front of an audience. It
Yeah.
seems really familiar. I don't know what that is, but Kathy, you got any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I need those improv classes, I think, because pushing my boundaries or trying to stretch or trying to get outside of my box and all that is doing things like this. I'm just not super comfortable doing these things. So that's why I'm doing them more. Just like you did the improv classes. I teach judo every night, so I'm really used to that, and my kids and my adults that I teach, but not with a giant audience at a BJJ facility that I don't know anybody there. So I pushed myself and I said yes twice this year to doing one of those large jiu-jitsu seminars. And it really helped me improve on communicating better. And like you're doing your improv classes, I'm trying to do more of that. And you're right. Some people can just hole up and sit in their box, or you break out of your box and try to improve, because why not? We're only on this thing one time around, so we might as well live it. Why not? The worst that can happen. I have a bracelet that I got made up for myself, and I got 100 more to give out, and it says, what's the worst that can happen? Well, it's the initials of it. And I gave them out to all my jiu-jitsu and judo athletes, because you snap it and go, oh yeah, what's the worst that can happen? And you just go do it.
I love it.
Love
I
it.
love it. It's interesting because it's how I got into podcasting, was the fact that I just said no one else is doing it, and I guess I'll do it until somebody better shows up. And look at where we are now. This is pretty awesome. Sean, I'm going to come to you. What are your thoughts on your own question?
So I basically tried to exemplify what I'm trying to do when I was doing that little thing about the baton. Like, there's just no way at all a year ago I would have relayed that. So what popped into my head was I was in a crowd and then someone hands me a baton story. There's no way I would have told that story out loud. But it's about becoming comfortable with the thoughts that you have, the moment that you've got in front of you, and delivering on the moment in a way that you hope will be impactful to at least one other person. And that's my only hope. And I don't know if my rambling nonsense about a baton gets handed to me will help anyone. It may actually be detrimental. I don't know. But I got to have faith in the fact that if I say it out there, I'll learn from the moment later tonight when I rewatch this episode. I'll listen to myself and I'll think, "Oh, come on, you freaking idiot. Why did you say that?" And I'll refine my trajectory as I move forward in these kind of episodes. And so the things that I say on a podcast are a result of all the minor good things that I've said in the past, and mostly a body of work where I've said some like not great stuff. And I try to say it better or try to impact in a more positive way. And it's a learning process. And as I learn moving down the pipeline of trying to do it better, you've just got to or I have to get comfortable with the fact that should I have relayed the baton story or not? That's what I'll determine tonight. And then will I ever relay a baton story again in the future? That's what I'll determine tonight. And this is generally what happens. And this is an important aspect that I think we should probably talk about, is it's not just a solo experimental grand journey that we're all on where we're operating in a vacuum of good and bad decisions or dumb stories and good stories. We are surrounded by feedback loops. And so between now, this very moment, and tonight, a handful of people shoot me a DM and say, "Man, that was a really good episode." Or, "Man, that episode was good right up until you lost your mind and started talking about baton runs." So, it's important for everyone to understand that as we are living these moments and questioning if we made the right decision, we've always got good people around us that can give us feedback loops if we stay open to those. And I stay open. And because I stay open to it, people know that I'm eager for feedback. And I'm not eager for the feedback that pats me on the back. I'm eager for the feedback that says, oh, bro, I just wish you wouldn't have ... I love the critical feedback. I'm not so keen on the positive feedback. But I know I'll have some by the end of tonight, and that'll help refine my future journey, I suppose.
I love this, and it's funny because at the end of every show, something that most people don't know is that we go into the green room, and the first question I ask everybody, I say, "Thanks, everybody. Really enjoyed that conversation, and what can we do better?" And I think that seeking of critical feedback is key for sure, because it actually. I had this question lined up already, Sean, so you just stole my thunder. I just wanted to tell you that. But, when the balance between aggression and control is not maintained, how did you address it afterwards? And I wanted to get into this specifically with you guys as well, is what do you guys do? How do you, when things blow up in your face, or you get the critical feedback that is, man, that was a dumb story. Then what? How do you manage that within your own self? Kathy, I'm going to come to you. What do you think?
Yeah. I mean, at first, if I found that I flubbed up in some way and it was feedback to me, I would hide away from that thing. That was pretty much my whole persona most of my life. I run away from pain and go towards pleasure, right? I mean, we're all wired for that, but I was almost extreme about that. If I flubbed up something, I just wouldn't do that again. It's like, on to the things I'm really good at. And now I'm like flubbing up almost on purpose because I want that feedback and to improve. And you only learn, it seems, most of us anyways, from failure. We learn the most from our failure, from us flubbing up. So I used to cringe when I look at the YouTube video comments. There'd be a judo video out there or something. Somebody taped my whole jiu-jitsu seminar and then it got 1 million views. And then I shouldn't look at the comments, but I sneaked a peek. And then I'm like, oh God, I'm never, ever going to do a jiu-jitsu seminar the rest of my life. That's horrible. Look at that troll, what he said. And then it was like, okay, there were 10,000 other really positive comments, but I only saw that one troll who said I pronounced something wrong. And I was just like, God, I'm never going to do it again. But now it's like, I enable the comments now if I make a judo video instead of disabling them, because I want to see, even though sometimes they just troll just to be trolls, but sometimes they have really good points. And I'm like, damn, I actually could learn from that, or that pronunciation was wrong, or whatever the case. So I'm welcoming it more now in my middle age to flub up on, not purpose, but if I do, to feedback it and find out what I could do better.
I love it. Luke, what about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of excellent points there. I mean, I guess the only thing I can add is, one, you got to realize a mistake was made. Some people will be so far in denial that they don't realize that there's a problem. So first, being open to realizing that you are a flawed person and mistakes happen, and that's okay. And then, yeah, I guess the process that I will kind of go through is there something that I could have done better? And that an honest take on what I could do better. Ownership of the issue, even if it wasn't my mistake directly, could I have done a better job informing the other person what their job was, or other things like that. So ownership of the mistake is a big thing, and having people around you that you can trust will give you insightful critiques and feedback is crucial. You can't do it alone. Yeah, realizing you made a mistake, taking ownership is great. But until you have input from other people, fresh minds, new eyeballs on the problem, you're really not going to get the best solutions, or at least the fastest way getting there.
I like it. Sean, any other thoughts on this?
Two thoughts. The first one is, it's been freaking ages since I heard flubbed up. That's a great word. Bring it back. Bring back flubbed up. We need a t-shirt. The second thought is this, and it is related to the question: the balance between aggression and control is not maintained. How did you address it afterwards? And I'm going to be a little pointed in my question now to Dr. Luke, and that is, and it's been in my head for quite a long time. And I meant to hit you up with a DM when I saw it, and it hopped into my head. And I'm not going to make the question too pointed, but it would have been quite a few weeks ago. I saw a video of you on the Victory MMA mats, I believe it was, and you were rolling with a bunch of killers, and Jocko was in the mix, and I don't know, for whatever reason, there was a photo that I saw in that moment, and I thought, oh, it looks like the boys went super duper hard. And it looked like you were wearing it a little bit, like you. And I don't want to say too much more than that. It just looked like you were wearing it a little bit. And you'd made a post, and I thought the way you posted up was really cool. But I almost reached out to you and wanted to talk more about, what, not what actually went on there or anything like that, but how you were processing, that session, for lack of a better term, because I'd never really seen you in that way before. And that requires a critical eye. I'm not saying that the entire world picked up on anything there. I might be off base, for that matter. But when I looked at the moment, I just thought, oh, looks like the doc went through it. I wonder what he's thinking right now. So that's my kind of pointed question. If you don't mind,
Yeah,
I'm curious.
we can address that first. You can DM me anytime. You're more than welcome to. But for what it's worth, I am on the receiving end far more than I am on the giving end with the guys I'm rolling with these days. I'm getting older. I am a hobbyist essentially, but I've been in the game for a long time, and so I can hold my own. But it's also not that fun to roll with beginners that I can beat up. That's not why I'm in the game. That's not why I'm doing it. I want to test myself. I want to try to get better when I am there. And sometimes I'm getting smashed, and I'm going against guys who are really good. It's their job, and I look foolish. And then on top of that, I'm already tired from my job, or I'm not feeling well, or whatever it is. But kind of going through a gauntlet and sweating it out and getting humility instilled upon me, I come out with some things to work on. And certainly, always, as I've said before, humility is a good thing. And it's a fresh dose all the time.
I like this. Some days you're the hammer and some days you're the nail. And, if you're in a really good situation in terms of BJJ, you should be the nail a lot and get some really good work there. So here's another question to add on to this. How do you manage when that happens more than you would like it to? Or perhaps for the beginners out there who are getting just smashed all the time, what advice would you give them? I'm going to come right back to you, Luke. What do you think?
Yeah, well, you got to stick with it one way or another if you want to get better. And for me, even I've been doing it for a long time. As I was mentioning, I'm getting smashed often, and it's because I'm at the point where I go out of my way to seek the really good people. But to get better, say I want to try a new technique, something I saw on Instagram. I'm like, oh, that looks cool. I'm going to steal that. This high level guy makes it work. I'm going to make it work too. You're going to take a step back, maybe even 2 steps back. Guys are going to take advantage of you being out of position because you're trying something, and then you get tapped. But you learn something, and you then try it again, and maybe now you don't get tapped, but you lose a position, and now you're on bottom. And then the next time you're a little closer, and then you get it. Now your game has opened up. And you're that much better for having tried something and losing a few times because you're trying. Now you have something more to build on. And there's things that I never even knew I could do just a year ago that now it's part of my game. But I got tapped a few times trying to make it happen. And that's part of it. Some people go faster, and it's frustrating when you see that guy who started at the same time as you, who's getting promoted faster or beating up people that beat you up. And that's life. It's okay. And you will get better at your own pace if you put in the time and realize it's all part of it.
I absolutely love that. Kathy, thoughts on this?
For sure. It's good to be the nail a lot, and even put yourself into bad positions like we were talking about before, and be the nail. Even if you know you could dominate that person, you just give them your arm or your neck and try from there and give them some confidence as well. But if you're, one thing that I've found is when somebody is, say, there's, for example, at my dojo, a girl who's quite small, and she's always getting smashed. I mean, they try to be gentle with her, and she's getting discouraged. And so I came back to the dojo after some time off and saw that she was just, it's just the nature of those classes, the daytime classes. There's all big guys, and they try to be gentle, but she's always getting smashed. So I suggested to her, why don't you come with me to some of these open mats, you know, in another neighboring town? And there's other white belts and blue belts that are girls for you to work out with. And man, after that first open match, I didn't know I could win. I didn't, not win, but oh my God, I could pass her guard. It was unreal. And that teenage boy that I fought, like I threw him with that throw that you showed me. She was so excited, a whole new brand new, she was about to quit, but a whole brand new excitement for jiu-jitsu. So sometimes you got to show them they can be the hammer and not always be the nail. And it re-energizes them.
Good
That's
coaching.
fantastic. Good coaching for sure. Sean, thoughts on this?
Yeah, precisely my thought. Good coaching. And that coaching comes about through the understanding of perception or perspective. And so we all have our own internal perception of how we're running our game, how well or not we're doing in life, whether we can do this or do that, all the things that we have in our head that we perceive ourselves as. Well, that's a one-dimensional construct in our head. The three-dimensional construct is what we think combined with what others around us think we can or can't do. The perception of ourselves is also the perception of others that's reflected on us. And so you have to kind of tap into that. And if you're a solo player who's hopping on the mats and banging it out and then heading home and never really thinking about these kind of things, it's good to have a good coach who'll think about these things for you to adjust your perception of who you are on the mats. And so that perception can be negative or positive, and that might need some shaping. And the shaping might require moving the perception in almost a negative direction sometimes to see if any positivity comes out of that, or moving a person in a really positive direction that they're not used to so that they understand how much negativity they were coming out of. And so it's a coach's job to play with your perception. And by play, I don't mean like thoughtlessly, but move your perception of who you are in a way that exists around you as maybe a box that you haven't bumped up against the edges yet to see who you actually are. Our own limited scope of our own sense of ourselves is what defines us. But if we encourage others or recruit others or incorporate other opinions about who we are, that's generally the case of what we are rather than what we think we are. And so you got to reach out for good coaches or good training partners or just people who make you challenge your own self-perception.
Luke, I'm going to come back to you on this. We're going to go around again. Any thoughts on what Sean just laid down?
Yeah, I mean, we kind of talked a little bit about how you learn from things. You've got to surround yourself with good people that you can trust, who are going to be looking out for you to help you get better. And some people are, in that position as a coach, and it's huge. I mean, there's soccer coaches I had when I was 10 that I still can look back on and go, man, that was really cool what he did. And as a coach, you're changing people's lives, and you have an incredible amount of power, and you can help someone become so much better by purely just changing the perception of something. It takes a lot of skill. Not everyone can be a coach, but yeah, man, if you can find a great coach, you're halfway to overcoming just about anything.
I will 100% agree with that one. Kathy, any additional thoughts on this?
Yeah, and being a good teammate as well, I think is critical. For example, that previous example was just a teammate that I saw struggling. And I think I've been helped along by my teammates as well in the same fashion, and suggestions made to me that, were super helpful along my journey. And I didn't maybe even have a coach for a while, but I had teammates that would help me along my journey. And coaches for sure are number one if you've got a good one. But if sometimes you don't land in when you move and you're in a new city and you go to the dojo and there's maybe not the perfect person that you would love, and they're not encouraging or supportive or something, but there's teammates all around you, and there's neighboring towns with other coaches and other teammates as well. And there's so many in jiu-jitsu open mats. So you can garner some of that support from basically your sports community. Judo has a good tight-knit community. Jiu-jitsu for sure does. And no matter what region you live in, unless you're in some podunk town that has only one jiu-jitsu studio, but nowadays every town has like 25 to choose from. So you shop around, you go to all the open mats, and if you're not getting what you need at coaching wise or teammates wise, you just go elsewhere. If you're committed financially to that one because you prepaid for 2 years or something, then stick it out there because it's a financial thing, but go to all the open mats everywhere else, and you'll find that support within your community.
Yeah, I try to go to as many open mats as I possibly can. The interesting part about it is that you get used to the things around you, right? Like when I roll with the people on my mats, I know them. I know how they roll. They know how I roll. We kind of you got to figure out new ways to do the same things over and over again. And I think this applies in life as well, as that if we get into these life routines of just like, this is the way things go, and I do this and I do that and I do these things and everything works out the same way, and so on and so forth. But I really love the idea of, seeking open mats in life, right? Of going out and doing new things like Luke was talking about the improv class, or going out and trying different realms, because if I go to a different set of mats, they're gonna push me in different ways. They're gonna test me in different ways. And I think this is a really key factor of this. And I just want to get your guys' thoughts on it. Sean, I'm going to start with you. Thoughts on this?
Well, the thing that I want to say is not to let it slip through the cracks. When we're talking about a coach interacting with a student, or a coach interacting with someone else who's either in a sport or in the game of life, when you're coaching in that moment, there's the interaction between you and the person, and then there's the interaction between you, the person, and the world that is observing. And so on the mats, as an example, if someone is coaching me and I'm paying direct attention to my coach, I'm like totally target locked. There's someone over on the side of the mats, maybe 50 feet away, who is either casually seeing how that all plays out, or specifically is target locked themselves on the target lock moment between me and a coach. And I think the coach in that moment has to play the situation not just to me, but to the crowd to some degree, because that tertiary or that ripple on effect across the mats, or in the example right now where Luke and Kathy are to some degree coaching us, passing on their wisdom, well, they're not just coaching me and coaching Chance. They're coaching anyone who's going to be listening to this later. So it's not just a one-on-one situation. It is, again, that ripple on sort of arm's distance plus observation that is sometimes more important than just the simple one-on-one moment that's happening between coach and student. We've all been to places where the coach is dealing with the situation, but many eyes are on that coaching moment. And if the coach is doing it wrong, like if he or she is yelling and throwing clipboards and all of that good stuff, well, not only does it spoil the moment for the student or for the athlete, it spoils it for the crowd. And so the lessons that we pass on as coaches, or as Luke and Kathy pass it on to us right now, if they were being jerks about it, for some people out there, it would spoil coaches as a worthy profession or as a worthy pursuit. And so I think of these things as not just the moment with the person, but I also think about it with the crowd.
Interesting. I'm going to come back. I'm going to hit this up. Lucius, what do you think on that?
Yeah, I mean, well, we'll just, we're on a podcast. We're thousands of miles away from each other, yet here we are interacting, and potentially, yes, many people listening to us, and so there's pretty cool ways. I mean, I don't necessarily have aspirations to be a coach necessarily, but if I can be a good example or inspire someone to try something new or make themselves better in some way, then awesome. And that was able to be achieved by having a conversation that could be projected out to many people. And it was part of my motivation to start putting some videos out there on YouTube about orthopedic issues with a mixed martial arts context. But if one person sees that and goes, that's awesome, now I understand why I hurt, I know what to do, great, awesome. And those things just weren't possible not that long ago. And I'm trying to ride that wave and get better at it, and hopefully be a good example. And yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's no pressure, right? Just, us and the whole world that you're coaching right now. But I do quite enjoy your little, the clips that I've been seeing on Instagram. Can't say little, but the clips that I've been seeing of the orthopedic side of it, because I got jacked up shoulders.
Oh, no.
I was watching the last one on the rotator cuff, and I was like, "Ooh, that's good information."
Thank you for watching. And on that note, compared to where I was 3 years ago, I have gotten a lot better, but I'm still getting better. But I mean, had I not started, or I just waited because I wasn't good at it, I wouldn't be out there. And, so some people may not be seeing some of the stuff I put out there because I was just afraid I wasn't good at it. But here I am trying to get better.
Yeah. The Sean used to put it very well. He said it was anytime he was doing anything for the phone, it was like looking into the eye of Sauron. And I was like, that is a great, great analogy for it. Kathy, got any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I just started following you, Dr. Luke. So I just went to Instagram and followed you. So now I'm going to find you on YouTube and subscribe as well. Because, yeah, these are people that we're reaching out to, right? And you kind of don't know your impact until you make it. And then afterwards you realize, gee, I actually have something to offer the world, and that encourages us to do a little bit more. That Jiu-Jitsu seminar I taught that I was super nervous to do because there was a high-level celebrity type BJJ guy there teaching as well. And I was like, no. And finally I pushed myself a bit and said, yep, okay, let's do it. And somebody videotaped it, went up, and it got like 50,000 views overnight. And I read the commentary and I was like, oh, okay. Like, you don't realize your impact at all until, troll from Morocco said a bad thing, but the other 10,000 good things, wow, I'm actually making an impact. There's a really positive thing that I'm doing out there for the world. And just like you're doing, Dr. Luke, now I'm following you, and I got shoulder issues. So I'll definitely tune into all your videos. I actually got torn supraspinatus surgery a bit ago. So I'm good now, though.
Good.
for a little bit, at least. You decide to go on another competition somewhere. Sean, you got any thoughts on this?
I do. We're going to make this the Dr. Luke on the Spotlight show, I think, because I'm going to refer to him as well. And it's the videos that you've been putting out, buddy. I do watch all of them. And it's not that I appreciate each video. Well, I do. But I appreciate the long-term growth observation that I've seen. So your video game has been elevated since I first started tracking you. You can see the evolution of your efforts, your evolution of quality, the evolution of just trying a little bit harder to make it just a little bit more Hollywood, as it were. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean in a way that is more appealing to the masses and feels more Gucci, more attractive, more cool to a wider demographic. I don't need all the glitz and glamour in a video to cherry pick out the stuff that I want to pick out from you, but I appreciate the glitz and glamour of a more refined product. So if I get my information and it comes across with polish, then I like that. But more correctly, I like watching the evolution towards that sort of direction. So I think you've been crushing it. And so with that aspect in mind, I want to raise the topic of short-term growth mindset and long-term growth mindset in respect to aggression and control. Because you can have someone in front of you and you can only have them for an hour and you can impact them on the subject of aggression and control. But if you only have them for an hour, do you try to impact them just to make them able to deal with the moment that they're about to deal with? Or do you try to inject something into them that they'll never see anything come from it until years later? Like Dr. Luke and like myself, standout people in my world, like when I was just about to leave England, just as I was 10 years old, there was a soccer coach that made an impact in my mind where I thought, man, this guy really cares. This guy's a great dude. And I've never forgotten that guy. And he didn't do much that was, he didn't teach me to bounce a soccer ball on my nose or anything like that. It was just something about him that made an impact. And so, was he trying to make an impact in me short term? Or was he trying to make an impact in me long term? And I've always used that guy as the example as to longevity of impact and whether we even realize that we can have longevity impact. And so I try to be kind of careful when I'm coaching someone that, am I trying to do the now coaching or am I trying to impact them 10 years from now by planting the seed and moving on and knowing that it's going to germinate?
Planting seeds. I like this realm of discussion. Kathy, I'm going to start with you. What do you think?
Yeah, planting seeds, awesome idea. We trail our little bread crumbs along to our students the best we can, so they get an inkling of an idea of what it means to be a good all-around martial artist, for example. And I always say when people join judo, hey, you should join jiu-jitsu, karate, taekwondo, kung fu. You should be an all-around good martial artist because every art has a facet that you should learn that will apply to this art. So instead of being very short term, I guess, I plant that seed for later. They may not do it because they're really in love with judo right now or BJJ, and that's their whole world. And we all know what white and blue belt stage is like in jiu-jitsu. It's the addiction phase where you go 16 classes a week and every open mat, Saturdays and Sundays, and every tournament you can do in that addiction phase. And so you would never consider doing another art because you're so focused on getting your jiu-jitsu better. But I always try to plant that seed even at a young age in the toddler class about how someday, maybe down the road, you could consider, for example, I just took up weapons training. For my 4th degree black belt, I had to do weapons in judo from ancient judo times. We had weapons in judo, and I just found that fascinating. So that was a few years ago. And I always said when I have a time period in my life that I'm not competing, I'm going to take up weapons training again. And I've just started it the last couple months. And it's like this whole realm I've been missing out on, and I'm fascinated by now. And it was never that seed that was planted in me for that, but I want to plant that in other kids' heads because I think every art can contribute to your jiu-jitsu or your judo. And you might find something later in life that you're going to rediscover that's going to be highly impactful on your life. And that coach at that time that said that one thing might be the catalyst to you doing that later in life.
Yeah, 100% agree with that one. Luke, what are you thinking?
Yeah, it's a debate that's always going on. What are you trying to get out of things? Is it the results, or is it a long-term purpose? Certainly some coaches are going to be focused on getting their athletes to win, and certainly we hear some stories about these high-level D1 college athletes getting their injections just so they can get back out on the field and play. And then they don't have a career as a pro because their knees are shot at age 22, So I think the goal should always hopefully be a long-term goal as a coach. And sure, you know, Kathy, you're teaching a little kid who's 8 years old some judo. They're probably not going to be an Olympic judo player, but if you teach them some discipline and humility and control of technique, those things are going to last them. And then when they're 40 talking to other people, they're going to go, hey, you know, that was a really cool lesson that I got that I carry over into me being whatever I am now. So certainly some short-term motivation, pushing a person past a boundary that maybe they couldn't get past before, but with the long-term effort of making them a better person, a better whatever they would end up being, I think should always be the goal.
This is I think we could probably all share stories of particular people or particular time periods or skill sets that you learn that we've been able to, you know, apply now later on in life that we've learned previously. And I think this is such a great skill set to be able to pass on, and understanding that what we do matters, not just, as Sean was saying earlier, not just to us, not just to our circle, but to those around us, right? The things that people see us do, the way we interact with each other, the way we pass on lessons or don't pass on lessons or anything of that nature. I think it applies beautifully to this idea of aggression and control, because I think the physical side of aggression is what most people think of when they think of aggression. But there is, you know, you can aggressively seek knowledge. You can aggressively seek betterment. You can do all these things, but I still think it takes control. So I'm wondering, at what point you guys learned that lesson, with that you could utilize aggression in order to better yourselves or go through school or whatever. But just wondering where you guys picked that up at, or at what point you guys learned it. Sean, I'm going to start with you. What do you think?
Well, I'm going to deal with the first part of your discussion there, where when do you show something, when don't you show something, how do you inspire, how don't you inspire? And I just literally did that this week, and it's I don't like really showing this kind of stuff because it appears that I'm trying to show off or be braggadocious or whatever. But what I did do was put up a video this week of me using, it's called Mitsubishi, not Mitsubishi, which is a brand of car. It's Mitsubishi, and it's just throwing something in someone's eyes as a blinding powder to make them flinch or to make them close their eyes or make them fade back a little bit. And then you get to blast them with a kick, or you get to blast them with whatever. And so it's an ancient technique. And I got exposed to it a long time ago, nearly 30 years ago, by, and I know this is going to sound crazy because everyone thinks that it's a pile of nonsense, but I got introduced to it by a very senior shinobi or ninja. And so it's a part of ninjutsu, the Mitsubishi, or the blinding aspect, just as it is in a number of other ancient martial arts. And so when I was first taught that, I didn't show that to anyone for nearly 30 years until just this week. But I've been doing it a long time, and I've done it a lot. And there's many times overseas where I've been walking around, and I know it's a bit of a internet meme, the old sand pocket routine where you flick sand in someone's face. I used to walk around in countries with my left hand or my right hand, and I'd have a handful of small coins from whatever country I was in that I could take out, drop on the floor, or throw in the whatever, use as a distraction. But I never talked about that until this week. And so I had to think about whether I was going to show anyone that. Because first of all, it kind of looks goofy to people who don't have an open mind. But then it's something that was shown to me that I thought was maybe not appropriate to pass on to literally everyone. But then I thought, man, I'm super old. I could die tomorrow. And if I don't put up a video on this, there's people who track me who would have loved to have known about that kind of stuff. And it would not die with me. You know, there's other people who are aware of all of that kind of stuff. But whether anyone who tracks me would ever get exposed to Mitsubishi, I thought maybe not. And maybe it's my job to make people think about these kind of things to some degree, challenge them within their own martial art or their own way of aggression and control or conflict, just get them thinking about things. So I decided to put the video out. I'm kind of a little embarrassed by it because it does feel like a bit of a flare, but I just didn't know any other way to explain the idea of Mitsubishi other than to simply do it on video a bunch of times, and either you're into it or not. And so I think the point I'm making is this, that there's lots of things that we could show people or choose not to show people, but it takes courage to display these kind of things. It takes courage to talk about some random idea in your head where you're standing in a crowd and someone's handing you a baton and saying, go. Like you have to have some courage or faith in yourself to do and say and be things authentic to who you are. So that video that I put up this week was less about a technique. It was more about me stating that I haven't shown anyone this for near 30 years. I'm doing it now, period. And then I didn't build it out. The real heart of the matter was I was just trying to be courageous and show it and then see where it lands. And I'm still torn on the idea that I put it up this week. There's part of me that wants to delete it or retract it or pull it back. But it's out there now. And I've just got to live with the fact that I hope I did it for the right reason. But it's these kind of moments that I think it's important for certainly me to just keep not ruminating on it, but keep considering, was that a good idea, Sean, to put it out there? Or should I have not put it out there? I don't want anyone to think that decisions that we make are just a one and done. You pull the trigger and you never think about it again. I think about whether that was a good idea or not, and I'll be thinking about it a year from now. So one and done is not my way, and I don't think it should be anyone's way.
Yeah, I personally really like the videos. I think they were great, and pocket sand is definitely a fun thing to play with. But it goes to show a lot of things that are involved in this. It's not just a one and done. I had a comment here on the Instagram thing that Yuri Bond from Yuri. He says, "Hey Sean, it's better to use CS balloon for the Shinobi thing." So keep that in mind in case you want to use tear gas next time. Luke, you got any thoughts on this?
Yeah, well, I mean, kind of as you talked about, aggression could have a lot of different forms. A lot of people think of, the aggression that you might see in a fight where a guy just lunges forward, throwing blind punches and is out of control. And, sure, yeah, that's one form of aggression. But, just in my life, sometimes being aggressive is making boundaries, like saying, no, I can't do that right now. It's just not possible. No. And I have to aggressively maintain boundaries for my sanity and for my well-being. And so, that's one form of aggression. But it also comes back to control, and aggression without control is usually a bad thing. And control without aggression, you're probably not going to get a lot done, or you're not going to be who you want to be. So making perhaps what is felt to be an aggressive move by putting a video out there, that's being true to yourself. You put thought into it. You had your reasons for doing it. You were true to yourself. And, I think that in itself is cool, and you can own it. It's yours. So in the big balance of things, I think control is probably the most important thing, but without aggression, you're not going to get the things that you want out there.
That is a great point. You will never get what you want unless you aggressively go after it. That's for sure. Nothing's going to be handed to you. Kathy, any thoughts on this?
Well, I know I want to look up his video and do the Mitsubishi now. That sounds cool. Sounds like something we could incorporate into a stunt, maybe. Throw the sand and then punch or something. We'll have to figure something out. But yeah, it just resonated with me. Maybe was the aggression. So somebody's lunging forward. It's kind of in judo, you know, they're being aggressive, and you use their aggression against them, because that in judo is a lot of what judo is based on. You're using their timing and their aggression against them. So when somebody lunges forward, you take their weight and use it against them. And that's why a smaller person can throw a bigger person. We're actually using that exact premise in judo, which is use their aggression, because if they lunge forward, there's a many different throws you can do with their aggression. So I think, but it has to be controlled. You have to know exactly the perfect minute timing. And so there has to be control as well. And balancing that control with his aggression or her aggression is a great mix, and it kind of epitomizes judo. Chita kyoe, which is another Japanese term, similar to Seiryoku Zenyo. And that's that maximum efficiency with minimal effort. So you're actually using their aggression against them. I don't know what the original question was, but that's what was on my mind.
No, this is a great point. I love the idea of being able to use maximum efficiency, but there's also times where you need to use maximum aggression. And I know from like military operations, when you have to 100% put your not only your life but the life of your friends on the line, and you are full aggression, but you're also full control. So like you're doing your job to the utmost of your ability. You're trying to maintain such an extreme level of focus and, I guess, controlled aggression on anything that you're doing. I mean, for me, when I was, sweeping for mines and stuff like that overseas, that's what it was. It was complete controlled aggression. I was seeking every noise in the ground. I was seeking after, and I tell this to my jiu-jitsu students, is like, attack. Whether you're in an offensive or a defensive position, you should be attacking what it is you want. So in a defensive position, we were working turtle earlier. Someone reaches underneath and grabs your neck, take their arm, like attack them rather than just sitting there and defending. And I think this is a fantastic point. Sean, you got any additional thoughts on this?
Yeah, everyone's got to start somewhere. And if they're starting with attack, then hopefully that'll lead to baiting someone into, etc. And so the nuance of the game, you got to start the game, you got to pay attention to the game, you got to see where the game leads you, and you can't do it thoughtlessly. I mean, if you want to start a martial art, you've never done a martial art in your life, and you're not even sure which martial art you're going to start, sometimes it's not a bad idea to be a person of action and simply just execute. Just drive straight to the dojo, whichever dojo, first dojo on the block. You walk in, you sign up, and you spend a month there, and you figure it out whether you like it or not. That's good. It's good to be of action. But before the action, it's also not a bad idea to give it some thought as to the action you're about to engage in. And so if you are giving any pre-thought, that would mean that you're probably doing some reading or talking to friends, or basically putting your feelers out to see what martial arts is. And if you're actually doing the pre-work, you'll be bumping into concepts like the offense and baiting and defense and flanking and all of these terms that may be foreign to you. And it's okay to never go to a dojo and spend your entire life considering these ideas, these concepts, these philosophies. If that's all you ever do in respect to martial arts, then congratulations. That is a big win. However, action will also reinforce those concepts and philosophies. So that is your next step, is to go sign up for something. But try to wrap a bubble of philosophy or concepts or approaches to life around the action in life. That would be my thought.
I'm going to go around again on that one. Luke, any thoughts on that?
I don't have much to add. It was very well said. I guess I'm going to kind of explore the topic of feints a little bit. This is something that has recently kind of fascinated me, because it carries over into so many things of, when people are tired, or people don't know what to do, or people are just struggling to figure out what the next step is, and they freeze. a good thing to do, certainly in jiu-jitsu or boxing or whatever it is to move and throw some feints. You're going to at least make your opponent feel like you're doing things. You might get some information back. You might see how they react to a jab, or you might see how they're going to reach for your grip or something. And it may not even be what you're not doing something with the intent to throw them or hit them, but you're seeing how your opponent's going to react while maybe conserving energy or getting information. And it's something that's taken me forever to figure out, even in jiu-jitsu, is use feints. Make your opponent think, make them react, get them to do things where they're a little off balance. And then you can have your plan to go forward once you're ready and you've gotten your information. And I think that carries over into a lot of things, the analogy of feints to whatever you might be doing.
I love that. Let's get into it. Kathy, any thoughts?
I love feints. They're awesome.
Cool.
I mean, judo, jiu-jitsu, we feint all the time, right? There's a weird feint that I do that it's kind of unorthodox and strange, but I do a guard pull feint into an ouchigari, a backwards throw. And I don't know why, but 99.9% of the time I hit it and get the 2 points. It's the weirdest feint, but it works. Feints, I love feints. Back to the other thing though, the do then think. I just had a thought on that. You know, when Sean, you were talking about just put up the video, right, and see and get feedback and do then think. And, you know, I'm very much a do then think person. And then I'm very much also a regret person. So I do too much and then think later. And I've learned over the years to temper that a little bit. But here's just a silly example of that, though. I was rehearsing a bag suffocation. And so I'm suffocating myself in a plastic bag. And I'm like, oh, this would be cool. We just put that 2x4 hit in the head on Instagram and it got a million hits. I'm going to just throw this up. And then I went, oh, shit. By the end of the day, it took me that long because I was doing my deck. I came back and I'm like, I actually put that plastic bag suffocation up on Instagram. Like, that was stupid. So I took it down immediately. So there's, you know, I was just rehearsing to make sure it was going to be safe, something coming up. But there's stupid do and then think as well. And I've been known to do that once in a while.
Yeah, I think we've all probably done then thought and then thought about it afterwards and then thought again about it and again about it. And the rumination on some of these mistakes is it sucks, but I think it's also necessary at times as well to be able to not only reflect but remember these lessons of why I should not do that again, or man, I signed an NDA and that was not a good idea. That kind of stuff. There was a guy in my regiment many years ago that he posted flight times from Afghanistan going back home on Facebook. And that was a moment of reflection for him. And he got put into a position that was not pleasant because of that. But these mistakes, I can't even say mistakes, but these actions without thought teach you later in life that perhaps some thought is necessary. But at the same time, I also believe that if you really want things, if you really want to seek things deeply, you have to be willing to just go. You have to be willing to just try without careful consideration, without without the analysis or the paralysis by analysis, right? And that I think that is a really good lesson in life, is that, you know, you may have done it and it may not have worked, but you might have to do it again later, and to not fear that fear the repercussions as much as we do sometimes. What do you guys think? Luke, I'm going to come to you on that. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, action and response. It's how we're going to learn and how to get better. And unless you make some sort of action, you're never going to get the feedback to get better. You know, hopefully you're thinking about the action a little, you know, with a bigger purpose, like, hey, I want to get better at public speaking, so I'm going to jump into this improv class without any planning. Just, I got it open Saturday. Let's do it. Okay, it's with the bigger goal of, and coming out of it being exhausted, going, wow, that was really awful. I sucked at it. Okay, feedback, we're learning. But at the same time, the person's like, hey, I'm going to go run through this movie shot just because I think it's going to be funny. Okay, that's destructive, and to what purpose, what gain? So hopefully people are, with their decisions, having a fundamental, this is what I want to do, this is why, and let's see what happens. But in the end, there is still action.
Action is key. Sean, any thoughts on this?
Action, consequences, feedback loop. And so I think we can all be people of action, but the fastest way to learn whether your action is correct or not is to have some consequences. And if you're a person who isn't used to holding yourself extremely accountable, if you're not the person who is consequential to yourself, then you got to surround yourself with people who will hold you accountable with consequences. And so that's the great thing about the mats is if you're making mistakes, there's consequences to the mistakes, and it's a pretty rapid feedback loop. And more correctly, if you're making mistakes and you're also being a goof, well, there's consequences, and that's called a feedback loop. But if you're running your own program, helter skelter, flippity flop, doing whatever the heck you want on the planet, and you're not facing any consequences, you're not being held accountable, you don't have people around you who will say, dude, hang on a sec, that's kind of uncool. If you don't have that around you, well, man, you're not going to learn a lot for a long time. You're going to think that you're doing a lot of things right, and it's going to take you to a point later in life where that's where you pay the price. And so I'm a fan of the saying, you either pay now or you pay later, but we all have to pay. And so I'd rather learn it in the moment. And to learn it in the moment, I like to have good people around me who freaking hold me accountable. And I mean sharply hold me accountable. So that's my thought on that subject.
I 100% agree. Kathy, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, just echoing Sean, it's your coach, your teammates, everybody's keeping you accountable on the mats for sure. And you got to have that one or two really good close friends, or your mom or your sister or your brother or something that you can kind of bang things off of to see if this is going to be having consequences, I guess. And you could do the mom test on certain things, other things you got to use your brother, on the mats. We've got so much consequence accountability around us constantly, and it's just an always consequence accountability because we're being put in our place when we put our arm in the wrong spot. It's being armbarred. So that's like instant result. But the not very instant result is something you're thinking about doing, maybe a more major decision. You should bang it off a bunch of people that you can trust that will say, well, no, because have you thought about this result if you do that? Have you thought about that if it goes this way? And then you can, before you've done the action. So I think do then think is good. And I think and do and think before do. All of those have validity, but like Sean said, use the people around you to check it first.
I think this brings us right back to kind of the very beginning where we started, is balance. You got to be able to do these things. You got to be able to utilize each one of them in their place. But the only way that you ever learn how to use them or when to use them properly is through using them improperly, I think, in my mind. And I think this is a really great point we can kind of round off the show as to what we're getting into. Unless anybody has any other thoughts, we can hit some final thoughts for the day. Everybody good? Okay, so let's get some final thoughts on aggression and control overall, and then we can shut her down for the afternoon. I'm going to start with Luke. What do you think?
Really interesting topics. Certainly exploring. People are going to have weaknesses and strengths, but I think people are going to have both. And I guess my struggle has been to find the aggression, and without control, I guess aggression wouldn't be helpful, but control, all right, I got it. But aggression, let's go. And what has helped me is a focus, a purpose, where I can be controlled in going for a true objective, being aggressive with that objective. Yeah, that's where control has helped me.
Love it. Kathy, final thoughts?
Yeah, aggressively or controlled aggression and aggressively controlling it, I guess, is the whole idea. If we can get that in our jiu-jitsu and our judo and in our lives, then we've got a pretty good balance. I mean, it goes back to that sticky note thing, when you start setting your sticky notes up, you can kind of have your balance of your control and your aggression by reminding yourself each day, that's that goal and that's that thing I want, short term, long term, whatever they are on your fridge. If some people are visual like I am and they can do it that way, then you have a really good balance out you need to be aggressive to go after that one goal that's that sticky note on your fridge, but you have to be controlled or else, this other thing isn't going to result. So I love a visual, and that's why I've always had like short-term and long-term goals up on the fridge or somewhere you can check back to. And that constant checking back to also is your justification, I suppose, for your aggressively going after what you want, but in control. This is the first year I've ever had, like, my goal was to be goalless. I think I was telling you before the show. And that was the hardest thing I've ever got through in my entire life, because I've always had short-term goals, medium-term goals, long-term goals, everything. The goal is to get this. And I'm like, I've never in my life had a year off competition, but B, especially no goals. I'm going to go do my career. I'm going to do the film industry, and I'm not going to set any goals. And that has been actually the hardest test of my entire life. And I'm about 2 weeks away from it being a full year. And then I'm going to put up all my goals again because I'm going crazy. That's my final thought.
I love it. Sean, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I'm going to throw a monkey wrench into all of this. I'm going to wrap up with an entirely different direction that I'm not going to build out. It's just food for thought. Aggression and control. When people think of the word control nowadays in our modern society, particularly over the last few years, some people will see the word control or being controlled or they are under control. Take that and build it out almost conspiratorially, as if the world is trying to control you. It ain't. If you think the world is trying to control you, you're letting it control you. If you're aggressive enough in denying the idea that the world controls you, then you're in control. And so the mindset of aggression and control isn't just about kicking someone's arse on the mats. It is about being aggressive in how you live your life in the world that quote unquote is trying to control you. So kind of wrap your head around that subject for a little while and give it some thought. That's where I'm going to leave things.
Just trying to derail the train right at the very end. I love it. This is awesome. Yeah. But first off, before I give any final thoughts, I want to say thank you. I missed doing this earlier, but Luke, Kathy, Sean, fantastic conversation. I've been thoroughly enjoying this throughout. And I think that, the key piece, at least what I'm taking away from this, is that aggression and control is a continuum. And at no point is it a finalized destination, like I have control of my aggression. It is a continually testing and checking and rechecking and pushing the boundaries and bringing them back and doing all these things. And I took away a lot from this. So I just want to thank you guys. It has been awesome. So
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
My pleasure. This is awesome. I love having good conversations. And one of the benefits of being one of the hosts of the collective is that I get to learn every single day. And then I get to build on it. And then I get to grow just like everybody else. We'll see y'all next week. Chimo.